Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. My name is Renata Mirulla. I am the facilitator of EvalForward, a community of practice on evaluation for agriculture, food security, and rural development. And I'm really happy to welcome you all to this webinar, which is organized by EvalGender Plus and EvalForward. EvalGender is a network supporting, promoting the demand, supply, and use of equity-focused and gender-responsive evaluations. And as you may all know, it's part of the big EvalPartners family. So this is the first of a series of webinars that we are doing on approaching and showcasing good practices in gender-responsive evaluation. We'll have others, especially targeted at the Francophone and the Spanish-speaking community, and let's see if other communities as well. Today we will look at good practices in applying gender-responsive evaluations. We will have first a presentation that will draw from a recent publication on good practices in gender-responsive evaluation. And then we will follow up with good practices shared by practitioners and experts that will share and present their experience. Just a few housekeeping notes with all these webinars. We will share with all of you the recordings and the presentations, the PowerPoint presentations that you will see today. We hope also to follow up with all of you also in other, using also other channels to continue this discussion through blogs, online discussions, social media exchanges. Also, we invite you to use the chat to post your questions or comments. We'll try to follow up with as many as possible. During this webinar. The time is limited, but we'll try to follow up during this webinar and also in through other channels. So to warm up a little on the topic of today, we'd like to propose you a poll to see how many of you have already used this kind of approaches and frameworks in your evaluations. So to see what is the experience in the room with us today. So please fill in this poll that you see it in front of you. So have you ever applied a gender responsive framework for an evaluation? So we get a sense of what the experience is. And then, Angelo, when you're ready, you can display the results. I see a comment. Of course, we are here also to share what we mean by gender responsive framework. So that's a very good point from a participant. But I see that there is already some experience in the group. So 60% of you have applied a gender responsive framework. Thanks, Angelo, for this, and thanks all for voting. So in the interest of time, I will now pass the floor to our first speaker, Florencia Tateossian. She's EvalGender Plus co-chair, and she's also an evaluation expert from UN Women. Thank you, Florencia. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Renata, very much for this introduction. And thank you, everyone who is participating today to this seminar. So I'm going to share my screen to put on my presentation. And I'm going to start by saying that back in, let's see if this opens up. Sorry. One second. Back in I'm EvalGender Plus co-chair, and I'm also an evaluation specialist in UN Women. And in UN Women, we have been doing gender responsive evaluation for some time already. And I think back in 2009 is where we launched the first manual on how to do this. And here we are in 2021, sharing the good practices. So this is very exciting for us, because now we can say, we have accumulated, the world has accumulated some kind of experience on how to do this, and there are already different streams that showcase how to do this. And so this is what we're doing, and as part of this documentation, we actually gather evaluations that were conducted by partners at the UN level, 35 of them, and that's what we are sharing today with you all. And the background of all this, as you know, is where we are in terms of achieving gender equality, right? And so if we take the SDG Gender Index, we realize that we're still, doing poorly. We have a scoring system, and actually, there is no country that will achieve gender equality by 2030, and we're still at the rank of like 62 out of 100. At the same time, the background for all this work is really these interlinkages between the Beijing Platform for Action, which is the blueprint for us in UN Women, for EvalGender Plus, and for, I think, the feminist and gender equality community, and the critical areas of concerns there, and how they link with actually the SDG 5 on gender equality. And in this graph, you can see how these two areas link to each other. And all this, again, as the background of this presentation today. So what is gender responsive evaluation? So what we are saying here is this is a systematic and impartial assessment, right? And it will provide us with evidence about the extent to what an intervention has resulted towards gender equality and women's empowerment. So we're really assessing the degree to which gender and power relationships are changing because of your intervention. So it's really focusing on that. And that's why we're using different approaches, frameworks, and tools to actually get that out of your evaluation. And at the same time, is about the process and how participatory and inclusive we are conducting our evaluations to really hear the voices of women as a marginalized and this, that has been discriminated for many years, and every other groups that are marginalized when we are conducting an evaluation. So first, I'm going to just present three kind of forms that evaluation approaches take. So the first one and the most usual one is really mainstreaming, your questions about gender equality and human rights within your traditional criteria. And here we use the OECD DAC criteria. So this is really about having a cluster of questions or mainstreaming your questions across these criteria. And actually, when you're conducting your evaluation, there is a bunch of approaches that are actually more friendly to actually do this mainstreaming: utilization focus, appreciative inquiry, of course, feminist evaluation, most significant change, empowerment. We also have this other form, which is actually using gender analytical frameworks that come from social research. These are very well-known frameworks that have been applied in social research and are also being integrated in evaluations for some time already. Here, and in the document itself, you can actually look at these frameworks and actually see the pros and cons on each of them. And then we have a third form, which is really more related to system thinkings and complexity responsive design. And UN Women, together with the University of Hull and James Cook University, has developed this system thinking and complexity responsive design, ISC for GEMS. There are also the feminist approaches and a participatory democratic evaluation. So these are, this is what concerns the approaches. And then we also, have a section on the methods and the tools. As you know, when we're doing evaluation, the more usual tools we use when we talk about mixed methods approaches are perhaps desk review of documentation, focus group discussions, and more we have seen in evaluations incorporating additional tools that actually are able to capture the nuances of gender equality. And this is, for example, the scale that was developed by UNDP, a gender results effectiveness scale, where you can actually harvest your result and plug them in this scale to understand where the results of your interventions are actually falling in. Contribution analysis table, I think it's more usual, really thinking of the contribution that your organization is doing in terms of the results. And of course, the gender at work quadrants of change, which is actually very useful, and more you are using it in UN Women as well, because it actually gives you this informal and formal change, individual and systemic change. And again, you can plug your results in this quadrant, and actually it gives you a very rich analysis in terms of the gender responsiveness of your evaluation. Now, the next section is really about impact evaluations. And this is also, I think, where we are all, the world is in a way gearing to experimental design. So how do we apply gender responsiveness in these experimental designs? We have some examples at the UN level. Of course, the UN, as you know, is generally a contributor to results. So really kind of determining attribution of whatever the UN is doing in terms of results in a country is more difficult, right? But we do have some good practices, and actually you can look at them also in more detail in the document. And finally, I think the last section that is really important when we think about gender responsive evaluation is national evaluation capacity development and country-led evaluation. So this is the national evaluations, and what we're trying to advocate here is that those national evaluations also are gender responsive, so that the evidence that is taken out from those evaluations at the national level can really be used to inform, the process, for example, in attaining the SDGs and the process in attaining gender equality. Also through, for example, national evaluations of strategies and action plans that are related to gender equality. That's also a very important part of promoting these country-led evaluations that are gender responsive. So finally, just to share some key insights and conclusions from all this work and all these kind of different approaches and tools, I think the most common approach is always mainstreaming gender equality and human rights within your criteria when you're asking the questions in your evaluation. However, more and more we're seeing this combination of approaches. Impact evaluations actually, in a way, hold the promise of more rigorous evidence on gender equality approaches. But again, I think it also relates to smaller interventions. That's where we can do better experimental designs. And finally, country-led evaluations that can foster greater national ownership and accountability are very important for this. So I think throughout these evaluations that we have reviewed, we also realized that most of the transformative changes, were evidenced at the individual, household, and community level. And perhaps there is kind of a necessity for evaluations to also, for gender responsive evaluations, to move a bit upstream to understand what are the changes at the policy level. So this is all for now. And now I think we're going to pass into listening from the practitioners and actually how they did this and how they apply these frameworks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Florencia. Thank you, colleagues, for listening. And I can see that already this presentation generated quite a stir in the chat box. So I'll present myself. I'm Svetlana Negroustoueva. I'm another co-chair of EvalGender Plus, outgoing co-chair of that network, and also a lead for the evaluation function at the CGIAR, global initiative, global organization for agricultural research. And while we move into the presentations by practitioners who will probably be able to answer some of your questions and concerns that you've raised, we want to do another poll. And the question is, based on your experiences, what is the main challenge to applying these frameworks to evaluations that are not specifically addressing gender equality? And we hope that you will be able to address this based on your experiences, based on what you just heard from Florencia. There's no choice.
Angelo, can you put, sorry, Svetlana, I'm asking Angelo to put up the poll.
Thank you. Thank you. So we hope this is for 1 minute that will keep you busy while we prepare for the distinguished panel of practitioners. Only one choice. Give it a few more seconds, and then Angela can show us the results. Yes, we have interesting results. On the first two, the limited knowledge of gender responsive frameworks and availability of source data information to apply such frameworks. So those seem to be the top two, followed by the limited time or resources, which we know as the key evaluation constraint and limitation in any type of evaluation. So hopefully we'll be able to discuss some of this and kind of how our experts have addressed those in their work in different settings. So the panel today, as was included in the announcement of this webinar, we have two people's team from IFAD Evaluation Office, Johanna, Pennarz, and Eoghan Molloy. And they will talk about the use of gender transformative frameworks in the context of rural development in IFAD evaluations. Then we have a panel of evaluation experts, independent evaluation experts, Natalia, Kosheleva, Donna, Podems, and Nuha Bashir, and they will lead us through the application of such frameworks in very different settings, in geographically and project-wise, the context. So I move to the presentation by our colleagues from IFAD, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Svetlana. Can I share my screen now? Okay. Right, so see it okay? Right, here we are. Okay, I'm going to talk about two evaluations where we have used gender transformative frameworks in the context of IFAD's evaluation. One is an evaluation synthesis, which we conducted in 2016, and another is a project evaluation, which my colleague Eoghan conducted 2 years ago. For the evaluation synthesis, the framework we used was basically following a theory of change approach. So we have, we start from the strategies on gender, go into interventions, practice areas, and then into the changes in the transformative changes. So under the strategies, we have the typical IFAD strategies on gender. For example, gender mainstreaming, gender sensitization, targeted intervention for women, and so on. So this is what we have as strategies. We have the IFAD classical intervention areas and natural resource management, access to markets, value chains, enterprise development, and so on. And then we come into practice areas. So here we identified types of practices that might lead to transformative changes. So these include, for example, improved access to resources, services, and opportunities, reduced time burden and equal responsibilities, enhanced awareness, consciousness, and confidence, and of course, that we address the political, legal, and institutional constraints. So this is the kind of practices that IFAD supports, and with the aim to get to lead to a transformative change. And someone said it in the chat. We look at social inclusion, of course. We want to have equal benefits to those hard to reach. This is an aim which IFAD has. Now we come to the transformational changes, and here we see that we're pushing IFAD outside its comfort area. So what did we define as transformative changes? First of all, the root causes of inequality and discrimination had to be addressed. The gender roles and power relationship had to be challenged. And we wanted to enhance women's self-esteem, decision-making, and recognition. And finally, we found that gender transformative change also needs to lead to policy influence and practice active. And if this has happened, we can look at, can hope to achieve equity, inclusion, and non-discrimination as part of the sustainable development and equitable poverty reduction. So this was the framework which we developed for IFAD on transformative change. This was meant to stretch IFAD, beyond what typical mainstreaming and gender results mean. Now, let me show you what we found actually. So the kind of impacts which we found in our synthesis, we classified them into three spheres: in the individual sphere, the collective sphere, and the sphere of society. And for those spheres, we also distinguish between the informal and the formal spheres. So, for example, at individual spheres, we have impacts like literacy and functional skills improved, of course, women's confidence and self-esteem, men's attitude, awareness on rights, and equal incomes of men and women. At the collective sphere, we have things like joint land titles, inclusive community organizations, women in new economic roles, joint decision-making in households, and so on. So these would be collective spheres. And finally, at the society level, we have the more fundamental changes. For example, reduced time poverty for women, national alliances and networks, and social capital, women's leadership, gender norms changed. Now, what has IFAD actually achieved? So we saw a cluster of impacts documented in the individual sphere, both formal and informal. We saw a cluster of impacts documented for the informal sphere at the collective level, but less so at the formal sphere collective level, and even fewer impacts on society level. So from this, we concluded that IFAD, in order to stretch itself into gender transformative change, it needs to do more. First, to formalize some of the achievements, but also then to be more strategic in reaching out for transformative results at the society level. So this was the finding of an evaluation synthesis, which was then published in 2017. Now I hand over to my colleague Eoghan, who will talk about a more specific project in India. Eoghan.
Sorry, Eoghan is having an issue with his audio.
Oh,
this is
okay. He was okay. He was okay. Right. Eoghan, shall I mean, I can't speak about the details here, but I know the story. Shall I talk for him, or how is it, Eoghan?
Eoghan, maybe you can write in the chat, because we cannot.
No, let me talk. So yeah. Eoghan actually, when he did this evaluation of the Tejaswini Rural Empowerment, Women's Empowerment Project, so we had a long discussion about his findings, if they were gender transformative or not. This was a discussion. So what he found, for example, there was significant progress towards women's economic empowerment, but there were clearly missed opportunities to maximize the benefits for poor women and to address gender equalities. Men hired for jobs in social enterprises of it being men's work, so it's very much within the stereotypes, but without considering if women could have been trained up to the work. So clearly not challenging traditional roles and stereotypes. Then they found also increased access to finance by women, but women often take out loans for farming and enterprises managed by husbands and sons. So this was actually quite a high profile program, but applying this framework, we thought it's actually not sufficiently transformative. Now, what does it mean for IFAD as a whole? I'm showing you our from our annual report on results and impact of IFAD's operation, the ratings on gender over the years. So they started somehow 2007 and they go up to last year, 2 years ago. What we actually found is the ratings of 6, which is the green ones, which is gender transformative. They used to be quite high. But then with the raising awareness on what gender transformative actually means, they went down. If you see this green line going down. And the same happened to those rated 5, which is the satisfactory. So our evaluators actually became more aware of where to look for gender transformative results, and became more critical about assessing the results that were reported in the report. So it's a relatively a smaller number. At the same time, of course, the moderately satisfactory ratings went up. So altogether, IFAD is still doing okay, but it could do more to support gender transformative results. So these are the 2 publications I've presented. You can all find them on our website of the IFAD Independent Office of Evaluation. So I stop here, and if Eoghan can speak, he could.
Yeah.
I don't know. You're back. Sorry, Eoghan. You want anything to add, Owen?
I'm having some technical difficulties, but thank you, Johanna. I think you covered it, so thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. And we are moving forward with the next presenter, Natalia Kosheleva. She will present the work in Kyrgyzstan, which is not too far from the last case study in India, about the Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index tool developed by the International Food and Policy Research Institute, which is actually one of the CGIAR research centers. And I'm looking forward to hearing more from all of you. Thank you, Natalia.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Natalia Kosheleva, and I'm an evaluation consultant based in Russia. And today I'll be sharing the experience I had during the final evaluation of the Women Empowerment and Agriculture, joined in Kyrgyzstan, or done in Kyrgyzstan. So the experience was with the use of Women's Empowerment and Agriculture Index that was developed by the International Food Policy Research Institute, actually for USAID Feed the Future initiative. And in its original version, it's a survey-based index designed to measure certain domains of empowerment, which are effectively who makes decisions about production in a house, agriculture, in a rural household, who makes decision about the property and the productive assets they have, who controls the use of income and makes decision about expenditure. Also, it looks another domain is leadership in the community. So there where the index is looking at membership in economic and social groups and the comfort women have speaking in the public. And the fifth domain is time allocation for production and for different tasks and for leisure. And it's like in the original version, the indexing means that you have to do a baseline survey and an endline survey and compare the difference, and it can be calculated. But we were not able to do this in our evaluation, so we pretty much used it as a source of inspiration for the methodology we designed. So just a couple words about the Women Economic Empowerment Program in Kyrgyzstan. It was pursuing 3 outcomes. One was better livelihood through increased income. They were also working to increase women's leadership and active participation in the community and national policy making. And also the program was expected to lead in a more gender responsive policy environment on the national level. And they had most of the work was done on the community level, and the main modalities used by the program were setting self-help groups and then joining them into the community associations. Women were provided training on agricultural and economic skills. Also, some of them were given small loans to start their own income generating activities. And an interesting aspect of this program that was rolled out in 2 waves. So by the time of the final evaluation, they had 2 cohorts of communities. And the first cohort started a year before the second one. And because they had more time in the first cohort communities, they also had time to roll out the gender action learning system, the methodology to kind of to change the gender balance in families mostly, which was developed by IFAD and was brought by IFAD to this program. So when we were discussing, the evaluation was commissioned by UN Women, and it was done in 2018, and about 2017, USAID started the Feed the Future program in Kyrgyzstan and introduced the Women Empowerment in Agriculture Index in the country. So UN Women were interested to somehow integrate the index or ideas behind the index into the evaluation. So we've decided, because they didn't have the baseline using the index, and evaluation didn't have money to do like the full-blown endline survey. So we used the index domain as a framework to guide our data collection. And so we use it to inform the questions we posed on the so-called change maps, and we asked participants to fill these maps, really asking them to reflect on what changes they see in the domains related to the index. And also they had the open space where they could document all other changes. And here you see like the groups working on their change maps. And then this was followed by the content analysis of what people put in their maps. And actually it was quite interesting. We also kind of guided their analysis of their statements, kind of linking it to the guide, but going into some detail. And interestingly, we find some very explicit and significant differences in how people were describing their experiences between the first and second cohorts. And it really, I guess the most striking one was that everybody was talking that women, because of the program, started to have less leisure time, but it was seen as a very positive outcome by all participants because they were kind of foregoing this leisure time to gain more income. But really, when we were interpreting it, the Women Empowerment and Agriculture Index actually interprets less leisure time as a negative outcome for women. So, and I guess because the main difference between the two cohorts was application of the gender action learning system. So this kind of results enabled us to conclude that GALS was mainly, the differences could be attributed mainly to GALS, and that actually the traditional economic activities don't lead to increased decision-making power in the families, while GALS does. So, and I guess the findings of this evaluation was one of the factors that kind of led to the decision for young agencies in Kyrgyzstan to start using GALS more widely, and kind of leading eventually to GALS distribution to other countries in Central Asia. So I think that's, this evaluation ended being quite powerful. And to conclude, I would like to share a couple useful links. One is to the paper that describes the index, and the second one is the report of the evaluations where you want to get more details. So I guess the lessons from this is that though we kind of were not really able to improve the index as it was designed, using the framework that it's based on was quite useful in guiding our thinking about what constitutes the empowerment in agricultural settings. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia. And swiftly moving forward, I invite Donna Podems to come and present her presentation on review of the CGIAR research program on wheat. Go ahead, Donna. Thank you. Good job.
Thanks, Svetlana, and thanks for inviting me to speak and for providing a platform for me to share my experience with feminist evaluation in the wheat review. And also thank you for gifting me the mug and the t-shirt. That's me, a feminist evaluator, and at times an evaluator who's simply a feminist, like when I wrote my book, Being an Evaluator. I don't always practice feminist evaluation. I am a practitioner and I conduct around 4 to 7 evaluative processes a year that keep me grounded in reality by constantly needing to think about what does feminist evaluation actually look like in practice. So today I'm going to speak very briefly about how I applied or attempted to apply feminist evaluation in the wheat review. In 2020, the CGIAR hired me as an evaluator, not as a feminist evaluator, to conduct an evaluation under Professor Victor Sadras, who led the team. The review's purposes were to assess the extent that wheat, which is a research program on wheat, is delivering quality of science, demonstrating effectiveness, and also aim to provide insights and lessons to inform the program's future. The primary audience for that was the CGIAR Systems Council, and other audiences were defined by CGIAR as, whoops, 2 people up there, as wheat managers and scientists, their partners, and other CGIAR research centers. I just want to be very clear to say again that I was not hired to do or construct or even engage with any kind of feminist evaluation. Having said that, all evaluations, feminist evaluators and everybody else, we have to deal with knowledge construction. So while they didn't ask for feminist evaluation, Victor and I had to make decisions about how to identify facts, what is considered a fact, and whose knowledge matters more than someone else's, in order for us to design, implement, and write the evaluation. How any evaluator views the world influences their evaluation design, and how an evaluation user views the world, and the world in which they work, of course, the politics, the culture, and so on, heavily influences the extent to which data, evidence, and the evaluation are found credible. Please remember that statement, because that is the key point to the next 3.5 minutes of my presentation. Here are the basic tenets that a lot of people would agree are the core to feminist evaluation. A couple of years ago, I took these tenets and I changed them into principles, being guided by Michael Patton's principle-focused evaluation theory. I only have a few minutes to demonstrate how I use this in the WEET review, so I'm just going to focus on one. The third one, generate and use knowledge as a powerful resource that serves an explicit or implicit purpose. And I'm going to give you 3 practical examples. One of the findings we had at the end of the evaluation was that gender is used as a research focus, and gender is used to identify research or capacity development. So in other words, gender was used in 2 different ways. What we found also was that gender achievements in research, while often notable, were often siloed. I consider this to be an example of a finding that comes out of a gender approach. It does not challenge women's position in society within CGIAR or within WEET, but rather it mapped it, it documented it, and it recorded it. Had I been able to push a feminist agenda, I would have been able to push a little bit more of what you see on the right, to bring about and to do something to create change. Again, the flash is up in front of you so you don't forget. And here I'll be focusing on 3. Whoops, sorry, that was a little too quick. I'll be focusing again on number 3. What Victor and I did, to the best of our ability, was to consider and recognize different voices in power during the evaluation process. For us, in the WEET example with CGIAR, the main voices that we were hearing were between WEET, the WEET Research Center, and CGIAR, who had very often different voices and power struggles. At the end of the evaluation, we presented to WEET, and they said that they were happy with the review. They gave us feedback such as they felt that their position, their voice, and their experience was well reflected. WEET recommended that our process be used and followed for the remaining reviews of the other research centers. However, the CGIAR, who in this case had more power than the WEET Research Center, rejected parts of the review that mostly strongly showed WEET's voice and parts of our process that gave agency to WEET and its key stakeholders. The power struggle for us to fairly represent WEET and yet have CGIAR approve the report was constant. So being a feminist evaluator and advocating with our findings was a true struggle. Our approach was not used in other reviews, and just to note, I was also not asked to do any of the other reviews. But let me show you an example of how we did manage to implement 3 of the feminist evaluation principles. And again, I'm cutting this a bit short due to time. Again, focusing on number 3, but Victor and I also managed to implement number 1, acknowledge and take into account that evaluation is a political activity, evaluators' personal experiences, perspectives, and characteristics come from and lead to a particular political stance. And 3, be cognizant that research methods, institutions, and practices are social constructs. And let me show you what happened. What Victor and I did was follow these 3 FE feminist evaluation principles. And just to note, it didn't add any cost to the evaluation or even much time. We discussed consent with every person that we spoke with through a conversation, not a tick box exercise. We did this even though informed consent was not officially required. Simply because the ethics board or the CGIAR did not require informed consent does not mean that is not an ethical consideration and important. I mean, who makes these rules? People need to know why you are there, how it can harm or help them or those around them, how their information will or may not be used, and that they have the right to refuse the interview entirely or specific questions. They have the right to get to the end and say, hey, actually, you cannot use any of that because after all, it's their knowledge you have just taken. When we finished the interviews, we asked people if they had any questions for us. On the one hand, that's really polite, and on the other hand, it helps to address power imbalances. I just wanted to leave you with a practical example, one of the practical examples of what we did to try and shift this and be influenced by feminist evaluation was simply by adding the question in yellow. When we transitioned from the informed consent before we started, we asked if they had any questions for us.
Thank you, Donna, for the very thought-provoking presentation, especially for CGIAR, which I represent with the other hat. And now we move on to our last practitioner on the list, presented today, Nuha Bashir, who will talk about work in Palestine and projects related to cash for work and disability. Take it forward, Nuha, and I know that there will not be a presentation, so please make sure that we can see you, and yeah, go ahead. I am looking at the participant list, and actually I don't see her anymore. Maybe she dropped out for technical challenges. So I invite us then to proceed, Renata, with the next agenda item, and maybe she can come in when available.
Sure. So thanks to all the presenters. There was some activity going on the chat. And I saw Johanna already engaging with some of the comments and questions. There were a few touching on something that Johanna and also others touched on transformative change, how long it needs. Often we work on a project basis, and transformation requires a lot of time and a lot of many other circumstances. This was a comment by Ranjani, but a few others that supported. I don't know if Johanna you want to further elaborate on this. This was one comment, and then I don't know, Johanna, if you want to respond further more on this.
I think we discussed it quite a lot. No, it's absolutely right what Ranjani said there.
Okay, there was a question by Audrey on what are effective ways in which voices of women and men could be integrated in the evaluation process. I don't know if who would like to comment on this question from our panelists, or even Florencia, or on how to
I think Donna talked about it.
Donna, yes.
Hi, so yeah, this is Donna. I think that's a huge question and a very important one. And I think it would very much matter by your evaluation budget, your evaluation context, the politics in your evaluation, and the questions that you're attempting to answer. So I think it's not a simple question to answer in a forum like this. I think it's an excellent question, but I think it's one that needs to take into consideration a lot of different factors to be answered properly.
There was also a comment by Donna, another Donna Martins this time, on the role of the evaluation team in supporting better understanding of the nature of the problem, cultural context, and the development and implementation of the intervention. I think also Johanna also briefly responded on this, But yes, it's true. We also had another recent discussion on this on EvalForward on measuring versus understanding and how understanding is important. So yes, I think everyone agrees. I don't know if any of the panel wants to take on board or add a few comment on this aspect of understanding, especially in when talking about gender. Natalia, please.
Well, I think from my experience, I guess, understanding means also that before we develop the methodology, I think it's very useful for the evaluation team to try to understand, especially when it's in an international setting and it's not your own country, to understand how the existing differences, and not just defined by men versus women, but also how other aspects like at least ethnicity and age may be affecting. Because, for example, in Kyrgyzstan where we worked, it turned out they have the amount of power and clout a person has in a community very much depends both on gender and age. So, and I guess knowing this before we planned the activities allowed us to kind of do it in a more effective and meaningful way, and understanding how this imbalances in power can affect even people experiences when they participate in interviews and they contribute to evaluation. So I would say it's important to start with understanding the existing differences and in power based on gender and other attributes, and try to kind of build your methodology on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia. I see another question by Dennis, who also posted a comment before. This last one on clarifying the difference, if any, between gender responsive evaluation and gender transformative evaluation practices. Anyone wants to comment on this difference, if any? Florencia.
Yeah, hi, Renata. Yes, I also wanted to touch upon the last comment on the cultural context and the importance of understanding and the importance of the evaluation team in understanding that context, which I think is crucial when we are undertaking an evaluation. And just to give an example of Bolivia, where, for example, doing an evaluation or a gender responsive evaluation there meant actually to do an evaluation on the depatriarchalization of the norms. And whether, you know, I think the understanding of what gender equality means in Bolivia is about depatriarchalization, which is a bit different, and it also encounters cultural and other type of issues in it. And I think it was very important for the team to really understand that context and then come into and, understand what the intervention has done to measure the change within that context was very important. I think that's an important point. And in terms of gender responsive and gender transformation, I think we're talking about a continuum, right? I mean, when we're talking about gender responsive evaluation, I think semantically, what we are trying to say as well is that we want an evaluation that is able to make us understand to what degree the intervention is actually leading towards that transformation in the society. Really meaning that whether that small intervention, because generally compared to what gender transformation means and the type of interventions that we evaluate, I think they're all rather small, right? Because gender transformation is so big and encompasses so many things. But it's really to understand, how, whether, that intervention has really contributed at some point to start thinking, even changing of the norms of the way people interact with each other, the different groups, men, women, and also other parts, other communities in the society, right? I think many of the comments also are addressing that, LGBTQ communities, looking at the non-binary right framework as well, that will actually also lead to that transformation. So I think maybe we're used to, to talk about gender responsive evaluation semantically, but I think there are so many things that go into that. And I think those nuances are very important when we are also doing our evaluation and to take them into consideration. I mean, at least at the UN level, for example, disability now is also a very important element when we are conducting our evaluations. And so, understanding how the change has actually impacted, how the intervention has impacted not only the relationships between, power relationships with men and women, but also between other communities, and also within those communities, people that are perhaps more vulnerable and are, with special needs. So yeah, that's in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe if you can hear me, I might jump in. Okay, great. My audio failed me just as Johanna was presenting, but I guess in response to was it Dennis's question on the way I understand it, and people might correct me, but gender responsive evaluations will be more assessing incremental changes in, say, women's lives, but also in men's lives. But again, I think as Florencia said and as Johanna presented on, this kind of gender transformative evaluation will be really looking at what we had to look at in this Tejaswini evaluation, looking at changes in social norms, or looking at the change in, awareness of rights, for example, or, capacity to critically analyze and reflect on structures and norms and values. And again, looking at the root causes of gender inequality and discrimination. So again, going beyond these sort of instrumental measures of economic, just solely economic empowerment, or even just workload, but really looking at, again, these social norms, which, and, Ranjani in her question, about, transformative change taking a long time, indeed, and this was one of the questions in the Tejaswini evaluation, are we looking for actual results of transformative change, or are we evaluating more the approach that was taken by the project, kind of sow seeds for a longer term change, but, and there again, we found the program would be more, there were very strong results for, in terms of empowerment, especially social empowerment, and to some degree economic empowerment, but addressing these broader social norms, cultural change, it just slightly fell short. So that would how I would interpret it anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Owen. I see Johanna also raised.
Yeah, just perhaps I think it's time also for some practical examples. Someone was asking for it to clarify. I mean, what gender transformative means, it really depends on the context. So something that is transformative in one context may not be transformative in another. For example, in Yemen, we found it's even targeting women, not men, but just women for for training and cottage industries, and so on, had some transformative impacts, which would be quite traditional in other settings, right? But in a very conservative context like Yemen, it was kind of transformative. In general, what we found is, and I mean that's quite obvious, is that it's usually packages that contribute to transformative change. Yeah? Just one intervention is not enough, but it needs to be combined with others addressing the critical challenges that women face. For example, what we have in IFAD very often are the markets. So, we build markets, we provide women with credit and so on, and then we still don't see them going to market because they don't have the safe spaces in the market. So in some countries, it was quite transformative to providing safe spaces in markets for women so that they could actually develop their own economic activities there and felt safe, together with other women in a protected space. So that's just as an example. And yeah, for example, if you also have professional, training for women, capacity building, you also have to think about childcare. Yeah, what are you, if you don't provide childcare, then, there's very little which you can do. So that would be my answers. Think about the context and think about packages that contribute to the transformation. Over.
Thanks. There were also some earlier questions about this getting out of the binary logic of women or interviewing or targeting women, but also having gender considered as a continuum with the society and with social inclusion. I don't know if anyone already or wants to comment on this. These were early questions from Ranjani and some other participants. Yes. If there's any comment on this, otherwise I think we are reaching the end of this webinar. Yes.
Maybe just to clarify, was Ranjani referring maybe to, you know, an evaluation assessing these, you know, intersectionality and, you know, again, it's not just a homogeneous group of, you know, female or women participants and men, but of course, you know, why we in our evaluations should very much, you know, apply this lens of intersectionality, looking at different, you know, groups of different types, different classifications, different categories, how you know, men and women, various, we're all individuals, and you know, depending again on age, marital status, ethnicity, you know, and again in each country, of course. In India, with the Tejaswini evaluation, you know, we had the sensitive issue of even caste, you know, and there in some rural areas of Madhya Pradesh, also indigenous, or as they're referred to in that context, they use the word tribal communities, and you know, again, facing multiple intersecting marginalities, and you know, we criticize the program for not disaggregating fully in terms of the M&E data. It was quite binary, and then we were limited in the evaluation itself in terms of how we could comment on this, and we could only, you know, we did some spot check field visit missions where we tried to speak to unmarried women, or you know, versus married women, or older women, younger women, you know, different groups of people. But you know, again, the program itself hadn't really looked at this. And actually, my question, my response to that second poll was the lack of data, source data. You know, that's something we struggle with a lot, is the quality of the M&E data. When we come in ex post, it can be challenging.
Okay, thanks so much. We reached 1 hour of a webinar, and I see people are already leaving, time constraints. So I think this was really informative, and I thank all the participants for their comments and their questions. We had a last poll, but not a poll, really a satisfaction survey. But please also be in touch if you have other comments, because we cannot capture in this poll everything. But as I said, we will have, this is just a first of a series of this initiative between EvalForward and EvalGender, and we are planning soon a Francophone webinar, and then a webinar for Spanish speaking, and maybe others English again. Let's see. We saw a lot of interest today, so I think this is a topic that's worth continuing discussing. Thanks to all. Let us know your feedback, and join EvalGender Plus and the EvalForward, the community of practice. You can search us. Florencia, perhaps you want to add a few words? Yes.
Yeah, no, just thank you again for everyone. And I think the richness of the practitioners is so important, and we hope to have more of this, really understanding how to do these things in practice and how we are evolving in doing these things with all your comments. So on the community of practice of EvalGender Plus, which is the gender and evaluation community of practice, I share the link in the feed. You can continue posting comments if you want out of the event. Also, please, you know, send me an email if you would like to join EvalGender Plus or be part of the community. And we also have a Facebook page and a Twitter account if you want to contribute with your thoughts. I think all of your thoughts are also very welcome, and more experiences are always needed. Thank you very much to all, and thank you to our practitioners. Eoghan, Johanna, Natalia, Nuha, unfortunately, and Donna.
Thank you very much. And see you next time. And yes, also join EvalForward
Yes.
if you're interested.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
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 Thank you.
Bye,
Have a good evening.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.